Well, we'll talk about our panelists' views on driving a learning culture within the organization, how to drive the hyper-personalized L&D journey for business performance. Well, I hope you're all set now that most of us know each other and we have warmer vibes in the house. I'm all set to be very promptly inviting on stage, and everybody needs to usher in some happy round of cheer. Like I always, whenever I meet you all, I say that clapping is good for blood circulation. So exercise that opportunity, please, as we welcome our very respected speaker, our panelist, Neelam Pillai, the head human resources from Renault Group. Neelam, hi, and a very, very warm welcome to you. You're radiating like a lot of positivity with the color you're wearing. Very good to be seeing you. We'll just request you to be on one side of the stage as we also welcome Rahul Sinha, the Chief Human Resource Officer from Pidilite. Let's also welcome Rahul, hi, and very good morning to you. Let's also welcome Deepika Kinger, the Senior Vice President, Human Resources, DCB Bank. Let's also welcome Farhat Umar, the President, Global Human Resources, Mankind Pharma. Wow, can you please just extend a little help? Thank you. All right. Let's also welcome MVN Rao, the Vice President and Head of Learning and Development, Corporate HR from Larsen and Toubro. Let's also welcome Ashish, ladies and gentlemen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Vani.Coach. Let's also welcome Krupali Sidhu, the Executive Vice President, Business HR, Compensation and Benefits from Kotak, Mahindra Bank. Please welcome Krupali Sidhu. Hi Krupali, good to be greeting you as well. And while this looks absolutely fortified, let me please very quickly invite our panel chair, Kishore Sengupta, the Professor, Judge Business School, University of Cambridge. Kishore, hi, and a very, very good morning to you. Let's have a big round of cheer to welcome our panel members. This is going to be extremely important for our learning. So leading it and handing it over to Kishore to please lead the fort. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A very good, is it morning or is it the afternoon?
Morning.
It's still morning. Okay, that's wonderful. We start in the morning and we'll end in the afternoon, right? So it's great to be here. Just say a couple of words about myself and then we'll move on. So I'm, as was mentioned, I'm at the University of Cambridge and I'm a professor of operations. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with details about how things get done. We're here to talk about something very, very interesting. It's also great to be back in Mumbai. I'm a native of the city, so it's always great to come back here and sense the energy and the positive vibes as was mentioned as well. So we have a really interesting topic, and this is about hyper-personalized learning. And I think it's a topic, a discussion whose time has really come. And I'll introduce the speakers in a minute, but let me say a couple of things about the topic. Now, we've all been through God knows how many years of schools and colleges and fairly various executive education settings and so on. The way in which most things are taught, and this is true of what happens inside companies as well, is a certain degree of uniformity and standardization, and a sense that we teach what you might call a certain set of things, skills, mindsets, and so on. And then, of course, as individuals, we take them and utilize them the best we can. So that's a perspective. There's uniformity, there's standardization. And let's not forget, there's also a sense of community. You've been through various schools, colleges, and you have a cohort. And you wouldn't have that if, all of you didn't go through the same experience, right? Now, the other side is that we are all very different people, right? We learn differently. We have different interests. We feel very different things, right? And if we have to bring this to what we do, and if we want to get the best of ourselves, there needs to be a degree of personalization as well. And this has actually been the holy grail of a lot of research in learning and cognitive science and so on. How do you sort of understand what the individual is about and tailor the learning in such a way that you get the best out of the individual? And that's really the sort of an extension of that would be hyper-personalized. Focus on the individual, sort of the learning is tailored to the individual in a way that you actually get the best out of the individual. So that's how I'm defining it for today's session. And what we'll do is we'll get a little bit deep into the topic, because I think it's a very sort of a topic which is being discussed quite a lot in L&D circles, and it's being discussed everywhere, because I think we recognize that, learning really drives performance. Learning really drives the culture of an organization. And an organization which learns attracts talent, right? So how do we do it, and how do we do it in such a way that we can get ahead and, if you will, turbocharge the organization? Now, to help us discuss this are our speakers. So please identify yourself, because I think at this point of time, I think a second round of identification might actually help. So Neelam. Okay, so that's Neelam. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Rahul. All right. Deepika. Yeah. Farhat. Yeah. DK. Abzikate. Yep. Okay. So you already did that. Ashish. Okay. And Krupali. Okay. MVN. Yeah. Very good. So now that I've briefly defined the topic, what I'll now do is to like to invite our volunteers to say a little bit more about how they see this. So in other words, I'm an academic. It's great for me to talk about concepts. It's great for me to talk a little bit about, what this means in theory. But we are practitioners in here. And so let's delve a little bit deep into this and a sense of what it actually means in practice. So what I've done is I've asked our colleagues on the panel to say a little bit more about how they see hyper-personalized learning in real life, right? So with that, let's get some examples in here. Should we start with you, Farhat?
Okay. Thank you, Kishore. And first of all, thank you so much, ETH, for inviting us for this important event. And the subject is also very, very important because we are living in knowledge age. And this is the last stage of this world, and every day we are facing a lot of changes. The environment is changing. I belong to a company which is in essential commodity, medicine actually, pharmaceuticals. And if you see the environment and the disease, the unknown viruses are coming and pandemic is here. So we have to supply medicine all the time, 24/7. And the manufacturing is one thing that we cannot stop at any moment. That's why our environment for learning also is changing very fast. And we have a lot of equipment, lot of technology now to give the personal learning to each employee. We have more and more SMEs also now. It is not that we can offer a training to group of people. And because of the lockdown and a lot of hybrid workforce is there. So hyper-personalized training is the only answer for coming in the future also and the present also. There's no need for any training matrix. There's no need for any kind of schedule. The people can choose their option also in the form of video, reading, and podcast also. And the training department is also huge now, and it is nothing that you can go to the market and do kind of internal training or personal training also. The whole world was living with the 70, 20, and 10 kind of equation till the time. But now we are living in knowledge age. The 70 is something on-the-job training, and 20 is that you can plan something, and the formal training is 10. It is totally reverse now, okay? People have to have some kind of personal time also, personal subject also.
Farhat, and we need to move on. So finish the sentence.
Yeah. So it is more and more AI is there, learning machine is there. There are many options are available in the market, in the organization also. And people can choose their training also. This is the advantage of Kishore of this personalized training.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Sort of the mechanisms that propel us to actually get this working, right? Very nice. So, MVN, do we have some examples from your organization, perhaps, or context?
I would like to demystify hyper-personalized learning in the sense that I think it's been there for times immemorial. I think when I was young, I was weak in maths, so I used to get a personal tutor who used to come and teach me in a way I used to understand maths. I think it's very hyper-personalized to me at that time, but I'm sure all of us do to our own children or our own near and dear in terms of that. But coming round to organizations, I think there are very interesting things. individualized coaching, which has become a very big thing back again in organizations. It is nothing but a very hyper-personalized form of actually learning in the development. The second one, which I have seen technology coming in, I think we have been a very extensive users of Coach Vani. What we talk about is that when people are in various far-flung places where they cannot be brought together to do that kind of social learning, where the individualized, hyper-personalized learning, where it is personalized to that person, where he is in the journey, and the time when he wants to learn, and the form in which he wants to learn. I think it's a beautiful way the technology has come in to make that particular kind of a learning come to life for that individual at that moment. I think there are two things. And third one, which I've seen, is simulations. I mean, the simulations, especially for a projects and a construction and a major company like ours, we realize that how do we teach people, whether it be the safe working practices, or whether do you do quality, or whether you do any functional kind of work, how do you simulate the environment in such a fashion that the learner learns from where he or she is, and then goes up and then becomes what is relevant to actually perform his or her job. I think the simulations, the individual coaching, and third one is, of course, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, as I see it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. DK, would you have another example, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to MV, and I think you put things into perspective in that sense from an organization and probably what's happening around us. So something that really inspires me, I'm in the profession of learning for the longest time now. Teaching is incredibly difficult, you know. But I see the Learning Genome Project. So anybody who's heard of Kelly Tinkley, she's someone who really revolutionized the way learning happened at schools. We have such homogeneous setups today wherein we expect each child, despite his skills or abilities, should be trained in exactly the same way in schools. And the curriculum is so mastered in the format that everyone has to know everything in exactly the same format. And leave it to our country, everything has to be mugged up also, right? It's not really great from an outcome perspective. And I really like it because the Learning Genome Project said, we're not going to go by segregation of age, but we're going to go by segregation of abilities and characteristics of the students who really come in, and really then revolutionize the way in which they learn. And I think they really changed the way schooling should be done, and that really inspired me. If I look at it within the bank sphere today, the institution that I belong to, for us, for example, one of the most critical part of the journey is when people are getting promoted. And if they're getting promoted, then they know they have to go through a BEI, like a behavioral event interview in the institution, to really be able to show out their marquee capabilities. And I think the fact that we can put them through interviewing techniques or abilities, workshops, which give them a perspective on what competencies are, etc., we are able to hyper-personalize the journey there. And probably for a salesperson who's getting us the moolah, the bread and butter for the bank, right there, 3 things that will help them crack the customer's business. Understand how relationships have to be maintained. So I think that's how we try and do it in the bank. And the personal story, of course, which really inspired me.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now let's dig a little bit deeper as to what the rationale for this might be. Because on the surface, it sounds great, right? But on the other hand, what will happen is that everything has a trade-off to it. So let's now look at the first aspect of it. In other words, why do we want to go for hyper-personalized learning? What's the business case? What's the social case? What's the case for employees? To help us think this through, let's go to Krupali.
Thank you. So, like my colleagues just now highlighted about how hyper-personalization is existing, not just emerging today, is a norm which is there. It's just now becoming more prominent because we started realizing the need for utilizing that understanding of hyper-personalization into implementing that into the learning culture in the organization. Now, if I go back to the behavior that is changing for the consumers on how we buy today, vis-a-vis what was used to be sold to us earlier, now it's a lot became concentrated towards what I want to buy and how I want to buy, which medium I will buy and where I'll buy. From that behavior, if I pick up the thread to the learning, if I want to know something, I don't need to go back and refer to this, in which book did I find this. The first thing that comes to my mind when I want to find out, okay, where do I find this? You go to Google and search for that information. So the need for learning is moving towards being available as and when I need it, rather than it being forced to me on as and when the organization thinks that I need to be learning it. So micro bite-sized learning content or information or a product catalogs or how to deal with the situation or a process or how to identify gaps in the quality or how to identify whether I've done a right or wrong. Is that in that moment of truth I need that information. When I'm talking to a customer, if I've done right communication about the product, or if I'm in the construction side, and at that point of time, if I've done a right welding or no, and is it the quality to the required mark or no, these are the points at that moment is where I really need the learning understanding. And bringing in a micro bite-sized learning into different contents, to different medium being available is one of the key things, which is what I see the industry moving towards. And it's not just too restricted to the skilled workers, it's a lot even to the knowledge workers. So in both segments, we see the trend emerging towards the micro-learning in the organization. Thank you.
Great. So micro-learning, bite-sized learning, learning here and now, that applies. Excellent. Neelam?
Thank you, Professor. I was just wondering, the hall here, how many generations of people do we have? Gen X? Millennials? Gen Z? Right?
So no one wants to date themselves, you see, I mean, you're asking us.
Yeah. So I volunteer myself
So we are all
as
21 years old for the purpose of this discussion. So, yeah.
Okay, the reason I asked this particular question was it can't be one size fits all. So if in your organization you have 2 generations, some even have 3, you cannot have a learning experience which is common for everyone. So some people might be more comfortable doing something on their mobiles. So bring your own device kind of a learning, classroom learnings. There can be shadowing, mentoring. Lots of variances need to come in when you talk about learning, especially in this age where people, especially hypods, we find it very difficult to retain them just by paying them higher salaries. Compensations are important, but what people are looking for is upskilling. So that's where this hyper-personalized learning experience comes in. And I strongly believe companies who invest or feel that employee experience is as important as the customer experience they are wanting, they have a much better success rate because it all begins at home.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ashish?
So, in Mahabharata, we have Karna, and Karna had a curse that right when he would need it the most, he would forget his Vidya. Well, the thing is that we are all afflicted by that curse.
So only if Karna had Google, he'd be okay?
I think even though we have Google, we are still afflicted by that curse. Effectiveness of learning is measured in retrieval. And today when we are assailed by so many things competing for our attention, it's very important that people find out their own ways to lower the cognitive load, absorb it so that it remains with them. So it is very difficult to have standardized learning and then expect people to assimilate that and retrieve it on the spot. So without hyper-personalized learning, effectiveness is going to be subpar. So that's primarily the reason why we need to do it.
Okay. Thank you. So lots of really interesting concepts in here, right? We talked about bite-sized learning. We talked about immediacy of learning, right? And the point you made is about cognitive load. And then we talked about generations learn very differently. By the way, some of us are from an older generation. I hope you think of us when you design learning solutions. You know, we are not yet done learning, right? So, but the point is that generations, and also we use technologies very differently. And so we need to sort of take these into account when we think about learning in the organization. Now, there's another perspective to it. So I come from a university, and we have students, and we have students in a classroom, and they all take exams. And that's typically how universities work. But it's not only universities. There's lots and lots of other settings where we think about learning, not just from a personalized standpoint, but also from learning as a sense of a community, right? So while hyper-personalized learning, there are lots of really good points made. Let's now look a little bit as to what we leave behind, or if that's what we focus on, what is lost a little bit, right? So to articulate, if you will, the other side of it, let's turn to some of our speakers. DK, would you like to say a little bit more about this?
So more point of view that
I think use your microphone. Yeah.
Sorry. So more from a point of view that today, the benefits are many in that sense, where people really understand in terms of the journeys that they like to take. These spans of attention very, very questionable in that sense. So whatever they're deciding, is it really short-term in nature? Is it long-term in nature? That is something that really needs to be given a thought when we are thinking about all this hyper-personalization. So that's a perspective. I don't know whether it's been completely explored. So I'll probably give it to my other speakers now in terms of their thought process on this.
Yeah, that's really a great point. That if you're only learning bits and pieces here and there, how do we aggregate, and what does it do to our span of attention? How long could we look at something without checking our WhatsApp? And do we sort of get a sense of withdrawal about it, right? So learning has depth in it, and great point. Okay, so let's go to Farhat, if you want to say that more. Yeah.
You said something, the benefits or the effects?
Effects. So say something a little bit about what might be some negatives to this.
Of course, there's a big gap when we talk about the emotional connect, when we are talking about the hyper-personalized. And most of the hyper-personalized training is online or virtual because of the technology which is coming in way. There's a big gap which we have seen in our company also. I think it will be all across also, that the human touch is missing when we are going further this kind of, although I'm favoring this hyper-personal training and technology. But moreover, I think this is the only drawback we have, that the personal touch and many HR interventions like performance appraisal, and when the hike is given, I think it cannot be done through system. Okay, a lot of employees, they have a lot of insight, a lot of emotions are there. They have a lot of reasons also. If they are not performing, their rating is down. Although all the HR interventions are now connected with the hyper-personalized training because of the technology, but these are the major effect, which is their emotional connect is missing.
Great, thank you. So so learning is social, right? Learning is what we share, and learning has a certain sense of community about it. I did mention the example of the Montessori, where you teach children based on how they think, how they learn. I go back to an instance, this was many years ago. We lived in France, and my son, who was really small at that time, we put him in a Montessori, and the image that I have in my mind is about 14 kids in a room, each doing his or her own thing. And they're not really playing with each other. On the one hand, it's great because they're doing things that they're interested in, but there was a sense of community missing, right? So great point. Thank you very much. Rahul, would you like to sort of expand on that? Your thoughts about what is lost, what is missing, and what's the other side of it, please? Yeah.
Sure. The important aspect of hyper-personalization that you can misinterpret is to focus too much on the outcome and not focus on the process that the individual will go through. When I imagine hyper-personalization, I actually imagine a one-to-one scenario and not a one-to-computer scenario.
Yes.
And that, if you can sustain, which means if you can turn your organization to a teaching organization, then hyper-personalization will happen always. Because then every single individual is trying to explain to another one what exactly you need to focus on to get to the performance level. And in the older generation, this was how you taught business. Apprenticeship, and not apprenticeship as understood by the panel sitting here, which is the act. Apprenticeship was the method of teaching how you sharpened your skill in a particular trade. And hyper-personalization in today's world can be unlocked very easily if you convert the organization energy in teaching rather than just focus on learning from bite-size, micro-size modules, etc. So that is my take on it. And I think if you stay focused there, then driving hyper-personalization for performance is actually much easier done than other way around. And what I have also discovered that a lot of younger generation people are much more confident to teach. They're very happy to share. They just need to be encouraged to do so. So I have rather focused on letting this energy get unleashed than to worry about driving it as a program.
Yeah, so this is wonderful. I love this. Two points I wanted to say a little bit more about. The notion of apprenticeship, right? You said that this is from an older generation. I would make the point that this is actually coming back. And I've seen many organizations, what they do is, so they hire people from universities. What they're also doing is actually getting apprentices, and they're learning from each other. For lack of a better phrase, learning at the feet of the masters, if you will. And one example that I can think of, which I saw about 3 weeks ago, was in a very large technology company in the UK. And what they had is students who were doing other things, and they were typically 21, 22. They were simply observing a group of others who were masters, in this case, of networks. And they were observing, watching, and so on. So that's great. And the other point, which I absolutely love, is that if we have only focused on outcomes, we sort of lose the true value of learning. And in fact, I'm sort of reminded of a saying by Cervantes, the gentleman who wrote Don Quixote. He actually said it, right? That if you only focus on learning, or if we only learn because we get something out of it, we lose our basic sense of humanity, which is what you said. So great, thank you very much. I'm conscious of the time now. If we have sort of explored a little bit about sort of the whys and why nots of learning and the whats, I think now is the time to think a little bit about the hows, right? What does it take to make this work? So for that, I'd like to start with Ashish, if you would like to say a little bit more about it, please.
Sure. So Shikha talked about Friedman. Friedman said something very interesting, that progress happens only when the weight of dreams is more than the weight of memories. So for the how to happen, I think the first thing we have to do is to not allow the weight of memories where we tried something and it failed, but to build that weight of dream that if we apply it, it can happen. That belief is something which is the first and the most important point to make any technique work. Unfortunately, today there is no defined playbook. So each individual or each organization has to experiment, be ready to fail, and possibly by your third, fourth, fifth attempt, you would get it. So that's the first how on this. The second thing, and I'll try and be brief, is to rely on the data. Very simple things. We want somebody to learn to be more persuasive. The data tells me that this individual uses first-person pronoun 18% more than the peer cohort, and that affects their ability to frame for common ground. And that's why this particular individual is not very persuasive. So instead of trying to teach them everything about persuasion, why not just help them lower the percentage of first-person pronoun, and that helps them do it. So if we use data intelligently, we would be able to minimize the investment, minimize the cost of repair, and we can still achieve it. So these are the 2 points I'd like to share.
Wonderful. First-person pronouns means you look like a narcissist every time you say I, right? Instead of that, you say we or us, and very good. Well done. Okay, so
Very interesting point, and I just build on this. If you actually looked at what we call data today and just called it insight, if you understood your own people, you would know what they want to learn. And rather than force them to learn something that you think is important for them, you just allow them to learn what is important for them, what they want to learn. I think absorption will be far better, and therefore the whole thing of hyper-personalization should also be interpreted from the perspective of understanding the motivation behind each individual. I have seen, my career has been in sales. I've been in HR only for the last 5 years. And what I have seen is different salespeople get triggered by different motivation. For some, reputation is so very important that they would chase knowledge because they don't want to be caught unaware in a discussion. For somebody else, the profit motive is too high. If just allow them to learn from what they want to learn, and you would actually unlock a lot more. So beyond data, if we started getting to insights, we would actually get the how part of it much easily sorted out.
Yeah. So this is worth noting. We often forget that there's a notion of autonomy. There's a notion of agency. We are all individuals. We actually understand what we want to do. Our bosses often think that, they know us better than we know ourselves. So I think this point is worth repeating, and I'm glad you mentioned that, right? A lot of it is really driven by who we are. Krupali, would you like to add to that?
In fact, build on the two critical inputs which has come in terms of information has to be data-driven and more
Is your microphone on? Yeah, it is on, yeah.
Is this better? Yeah, okay. So I'll build up from what two of my colleagues have spoken about already, which is a lot of data-driven and analytics-driven information and the learning content. And ownership is what you were highlighting it. Let the learners own it and understand what they really want to learn, and bring from that aspect what kind of a content are we really giving to the learners in terms of a micro-learning or a hyper-personalized learning. Another two interesting points that I feel is linked to this is flexibility and the tools that we adopt into the content. What content is really, is it like a 10 hours content or an 8 hours content which is going in form of a learning, or it is micro and smaller customized availability of then picking and choosing on, okay, of these module I need to probably focus on the 3 and not focus on the balance 4. Or I want to focus on the 3 now and the balance 4 maybe tomorrow. So with the ownership, bringing in that content flexibility and also flexibility of a tool. Is it really one-on-one through a coaching and a mentoring? Or is it some kind of an information which is available in form of a video or information in form of things to do, or helping on figuring out how to do in form of a tools that are available in the form of a learning? And the second important part is targeted instructions. So while the ownership is higher and there is a flexibility, it's what do I need to do in terms of a call to action for getting the things done in as form of a learning. I think these are if we bring in these 4 elements to the whole learning process, in the micro hyper-personalized learning, it becomes a lot more successful to my view. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Deepika. If you want to share Neelam's.
I think it's on. So one is, in order to make any of these journeys successful, I think somewhere at the starting point, knowing the aspiration of any individual is very, very critical. And I think we fail to ask these questions right at the outset. While we know what motivates them in the format of money, growth, etc., but what is this all really adding up to really matters. And I genuinely believe if I don't know the aspiration of my team members, what kind of hyper-personalized journeys, or for that matter, personalized journeys, also am I really going to create? So data, insights, having an integrated system, all of that really matters. But I think at the heart of it would be to know the aspiration and the changing aspirations of all our team members. I think that really would make a difference in any kind of learning journey that we create.
Oh, this is excellent. This is really nice. Ask them what they really like. Ask them what their aspirations are. Because oftentimes what happens is that sometimes we don't ask them. But it also turns out they don't ask themselves as to what they really want. And a deep probing conversation around that, I think, will unlock a lot of benefits to this. So this is great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, I would like to just add.
You want to add? Sure. Go ahead, yes.
I think we should be a little conscious of the fact that learning and development is supposed to help business performance to be enhanced. I think while this concept of democratization of learning, let the people choose what they want to learn is good. People talk about creating learning opportunities as a very important retention tool. But ideally still, organizations have strategy, structures, roles are there, and people have to be manned by capable people, these roles. And skills have to be given to the people. And while delivering the skills to the people at the end, the last mile connectivity could be hyper-personalized to a large extent. Because every organization's strategy, what it wants to deliver to the final customer, it's pretty unique. So any person who is walking in the organization should be specific to deliver that particular organizations. In addition to that, if you leave democratized learning resources available, people can, I think many organizations have said that 15-20% of your time you can learn what you want to learn. There is some time where you need to spend on what the organization wants you to learn in a fashion, in a way in which it suits you, in a way, in a place it suits you. But at the same time, the delivery of the performance is important, because finally we all need to understand the learning dollars also will drop if we do not demonstrate business performance in some form or the other, because there are not enough resources that are actually running after the learning resources also.
Okay. So I was wondering when the discussion about the KPI would come up, and I was very surprised that it took this 12 minutes left. So the point's extremely well taken, right? So it can't be free for all. It can't be, anything goes. It can't be let it all hang out. I would say this, that oftentimes we veer towards extremes, right? On the one hand, what we have is a group of individuals, let them learn what they want, and eventually things will come together. Sort of let 1,000 flowers bloom, which doesn't really work, right? The other extreme, of course, is that, we are going to control, we're going to maneuver, and we know better. I think what we are really talking about is a middle ground in between, right? Where it benefits the organization, it benefits the employee, and together what happens is that the whole is more than the sum of the parts, right? So very, very well stated. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So what I'd like to go around the panel, and for each participant in the panel to tell us a little bit more about, make one point about what is really good practice in your view to facilitate hyper-personalized learning in your organization, knowing fully well that actually what we have is a very wide set of perspectives in here, right? So with that, let's go around literally around the table in this case, yeah?
Thanks, Kishore. So I think two things really are critical. I think one is, while we offer a technology platform for people to choose likes and dislikes, etc., or what is more critical for them, I think having softer conversations are as important. These conversations go a long way in having an employee for life and not just for the first few years in that sense. So that is one thing. And of course, I think one of the other aspects is how do we integrate all our systems in an organization so that data is not centric to a short-term journey but a long-term journey. Because today data is not centrally maintained. All of us have multiple systems where people are putting in their thoughts and processes, or data is flowing from, so PMS, 360. I mean, you have multiple systems, right? So how do you get all of this to integrate is something that we all really need to think about when we are creating those hyper-personalized journeys.
Okay. Thank you. Neelam?
I would pull in from what the professor just mentioned, a middle ground. So while for some organizations, depending upon the skills, the departments, the functions which people perform in, some might benefit from ILPs, individual learning plans, whereas for some, I would really say social learning would help. The Teams channel, we all now during the pandemic have been hugely on Teams. So forming groups and teams where people share their learning experiences, learn from each other, probably that would work. So it's what fits your organization better, whether it's an ILP, whether it's social learning.
Very nice. Thank you.
So I would make 3 points. First and foremost, I believe more important than learning is teaching. And it's very important that leaders of an organization don't just desire or mandate that people learn, but they actually go ahead and teach. They're spending time with their people, learning their aspiration, understanding what is the motivation behind that individual's learning goals and what will unlock performance would actually be the right way to do things. We have spent a lot of time doing this, and we have realized that practically working with the senior in your own team is one of the best ways to learn. But it is very important that the seniors take out time and consider that creating a new leader is as important for them as completing any other part of their KRAs. So that's point number one. Leadership must step up to the plate and must take charge of teaching the team and making learning a way rather than just one of the various things that we are trying to achieve as an organization. The second thing that must happen is that you should create as much of content as is relevant to the team, and that's very important to do, and that's a process. And the third part is to ensure that you don't pressurize people to learn, but you pressurize people to deliver and take charge of their own careers.
Very good. So we've got 4 minutes, so 4 participants.
I'll just finish very quickly. Very important to tell that I have seen that learning has become a silos kind of department in any organization. So one thing is very, very important, that it should be aligned with the company's objectives. It should be integrated with all other departments also. Cross-functional connect should be there. Cross-functional leadership development should be there. And all HR interventions should be linked with the personalized training. Then you will find that HR process will be highly successful. And we cannot ignore coaching and mentoring. That will help us to retain the talents. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
Okay. I think, to my mind, two critical things that comes in the micro-learning and hyper-personalized learning is, one is each talent has a different needs, and each of them in a different journey of their life needs a different kind of an inputs on a year-on-year basis. So understanding that, appreciating that, and curating that really for each of the high performer or performing talent, for bringing them up the curve in terms of a delivery into the requirements for today and tomorrow is a key thing to my mind from the learners.
Thank you. Thank you.
Meanwhile, hyper-personalized learning, I think internal to the whole thing is actually creating that learning culture. Going back into the organization, if the organization wants to sustain in its developmental journey, you have to create a culture wherein the people who are capable are made continuously more and more sustainable within the corporation. And for that, the leaders have to teach, the culture has to be created where facilities and resources have to be given, and time for the people to become more competent at what they're doing through the various mechanisms available in the organization that have to be created. And one of the mechanisms is basically how do you personalize the learning, the delivery, or to the ability or the motivation of that individual's concern.
Thank you.
So Collins and Porter say that there is a tyranny in or and a genius in and. The only way we can run this at scale is to refuse that trade-off. We have to find a solution that delivers A and B rather than A or B. Till the time we keep wondering whether A or B, then we won't have solutions. So the only thing I would say is that when we refuse to accept A or B, when we say that we will find a solution for A and B, the solution will present itself. So it's again in the mind, is what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you. So lots of really good points. Let me just say something about one of them. And I think at least 3 participants have mentioned this, but I think it's part of the air. This is really about leadership, right? Trying to understand who works for us, trying to understand what gets them going, and teach them a little bit about, how to take this forward. Unleash a mechanism by which, people share with each other their knowledge, right? And at that point of time, I think what we get is the and, which is a combination of, what we know, what we value, as well as what others value. And that's really what brings us to the sense of community. I've got about 10 seconds left. and we've got a hyper-efficient group of participants in here. So all that remains for me is to thank everyone and the audience. It's been an absolute pleasure to moderate this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Panel to please remain on the stage, and as Professor Sengupta said, just the right adjectives. Give it up for the very hyper-efficient panel. All the insights that you just heard and helping us redesign our learning environment. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, as the panel remains stationed on the stage, let's have a quick AV from Vani.Coach. Let's have a look at the screens, please. That looks super. Like they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words, but definitely a video says more than, like, say, 10,000 or more. Thank you very much, panel. Can I request all of you to please rise for a group photograph there on the stage? And as we take that, we're going to say thank you to the panel, and I'm going to lead you all into the next session.